everyone, and welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. How is everyone doing out there in podcast land today? I woke up, took Mabel out to walk, and was immediately greeted with the strangest sight this morning. The one side of my street was cordoned off, and then, let's say, 4 or 5 houses down was cordoned off with not police tape, but like just yellow, kind of like inch-thick tape. And there were cops at either side, and farther down the street was cordoned off, and there were cops there, and there was a police officer who very nicely asked if I could go back into my house. I said, am I allowed to walk my dog at all? He's like, I'd rather you didn't. And then a little later came door knocking and said, hey, I'm not telling you have to evacuate. I'm just saying it is a good idea, perhaps. There was a suspicious something at the school that's about a half a block away from where we live. Again, he was being vague, so I packed up the animals and hoofed it in the car and drove around until, I guess, everything was clear. I drove around and then came back and there was no tape anywhere and no cops anywhere. So I'm like, I guess the suspicious whatever it was either rendered inert. In my head, there was some kind of bomb disposal robot doing something, or it was found to be nothing at all. Just a box, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, that's my morning. Hopefully your days, whenever you're listening to this, aren't as strange as that. And if they are, do I have the cure? Why, it's today's episode with Matt Bors. And if you don't know who Matt is, I'm going to read you his bio right now. Originally from Canton, Ohio, Eisner-winning comics editor and 2-time Pulitzer Prize finalist in cartooning, Matt Bors attended the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, where he first began drawing editorial cartoons for the student newspaper. At 23, his work became syndicated by Universal Features, making him the youngest syndicated cartoonist in the country at that time. Since then, his comics have appeared in The Nation, The Guardian, Village Voice, CNN, The Intercept, and were collected in the book We Should Improve Society Somewhat. Maybe, if you don't know Matt's work, you have at least seen the meme based on that. In 2013, Matt founded the wonderful political comic site The Nib. That's what introduced me to Matt and his work and so many other great people who I've talked to on this show, and ran it until it ceased operating in 2023. Most recently, Matt created the fantastic dystopian satire Justice Warriors with Ben Clarkson, and is writing an upcoming Toxic Avenger series for Ahoy Comics. I really love The Nib so much. I was really sad when it shut down. It introduced me to so many cool people, many of whom, like I said, I have interviewed on the show. Maddie Lubchansky, Ben Passmore, Derek Ballard, so many others, including Matt's own work, and today we get into it. Don't know if I cracked Matt. Maybe towards the end. Maybe towards the end we get into it. We talk a lot about growing up in Ohio. I love talking to fellow Rust Belters, seeing how close their experience lines up to mine, both emotionally and existentially. And while we had somewhat similar backgrounds, Matt and I are very different, but I love his work and I really enjoy talking to him, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Coming up on the show, I've been writing a lot and listening to a lot of music, so I reached out to a lot of the people I have been listening to. Leah Cole, Kishi Bashi, Angry Black Men. Wonderful hip-hop duo. I love their new album. Los Bichos. I just talked to them yesterday. That was fantastic. So stay tuned for those episodes, but for now, let's talk to Matt. Can I start with this? Because you had said you were doing something with the Toxic Avenger when I wrote.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, there was a Toxic Avenger cartoon and comic book. And I identified with it so hard. And I was thinking about this. I was driving my wife to work this morning, and I was just thinking, And I was like, oh, Toxic Avenger, Toxie, as he was known in the cartoon.
Yeah.
And all these other characters, Orko, Warlock from the New Mutants, Data from Star Trek The Next Generation, all weirdos who were somehow emotionally repressed or trying to figure out their humanity. And I'm like, oh, I identified with those. Not, you don't have to do 8 years of postgraduate work in Freudian analysis to figure it out. But I'm curious if you ever had any kind of identification with any of this stuff when you were a kid, or were you fully in touch with your emotions and your humanity?
I definitely liked the Toxic Crusaders and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles a lot, and a lot of other stuff at the time, X-Men, G.I. Joe, all that crap. But I was drawn to mutants and robots and stuff. I mean, I had all the Turtles toys and a lot of the Toxic Crusaders stuff too. Like the Turtles really got me. Well, the Turtles didn't get me drawing, but the Turtles was like the first thing that I sort of like copied and tried to draw all the characters and got really into at a young age. So, I'm doing this new Toxic Avenger comic, and it is pulling from that cartoon a lot. Like it's a whole new story, but I'm kind of doing, it's not entirely new. It's just updated, but it's kind of like a synthesis of some elements from the movies mixed with the Toxic Crusaders cartoon, and then sort of updated to happen in the modern world. Like there's social media and crap like that, which is incorporated into the bullying angle of Melvin Junko, who becomes the Toxic Avenger. But, I don't think I related to the characters in the way that you were talking about. I think I liked drawing cool, gross stuff and mutants, and like I loved drawing all that stuff. I didn't just want to draw normal characters. I wanted to draw pustules and weird mutations. I've always liked, like the X-Men I love, and I've read most of my life off and on. But I always like the weirder mutants that kind of don't get the spotlight as much. I mean, they have all kinds of books with them now, but like, the main team is usually all these buff people with 0% body fat and everything. Those
Pretty
are
boys.
those are the people Professor X is putting forward for the public team. But I like Glob Herman and the people who look like they belong on the basically people who look like they belong on the Toxic Crusaders or Turtles cartoons.
Yeah, Nightcrawler was also my guy. Anyone who was like a good person, but was also like a weirdo. That was Gonzo, I guess. Now that I'm in my head trying to think about all this stuff.
Oh,
Bumblebee of the Transformers, because he was the small one. Everyone else was towering, but Bumblebee was like...
I was never a Transformers guy at all. Although, from what I understand of the movies, which I've never seen, Bumblebee's like one of the breakouts, right? They had a solo movie. I've never seen him. I don't know.
I saw that first one, and there was like a piss joke in it, and I was just like, these are for children. Why is Michael Bay writing all this like weird adult humor into this ostensibly a kids movie?
Oh, I don't know if it's a kids movie, is it? It's for you. It's for the people who grew up with it.
Well, then I don't know what to say, because in my mind these are kids things, and I saw it because of the nostalgia. But I didn't think it was supposed to cater to me, and if it missed the mark on that end, and then I just assumed it was for children, and then I thought it missed the mark on that end. So whatever it was trying to do as an artistic project, I think it missed the mark.
They don't appeal to me enough to the point where I haven't even seen them, but apparently they're hitting with some people because they keep making them and making a lot of money.
Sure. Well, it's IP, and so if it's IP, then they've already spent the money to have it there, right? So it's just it's the landlord. IP is just like artistic landlords, just sitting on a drawing. I don't know. I'm really the metaphor. The minute I said it, like 2 words later, I'm like, I don't know how to continue this. But here's the thing. here's the thing. I'm going to go back to this because you're a Rust Belt boy. I'm from Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
You're from Canton, Ohio.
Yeah.
I went to Pitt for my undergrad. You went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, correct? So we kind of same area. And when I said I identified with all these freaks, it's because I was a Jewish kid in a very Christian area and I'm also shorter than everyone else. I felt I could feel the consonance with these characters, but you're like, nah, I just like drawing pus. I don't like, so I'm curious, did you fit in when you were younger?
Yeah. I mean, I was always into comic books from a very young age and, read them weekly, and through high school. And was kind of, into, I don't know what you'd call it, slightly counterculture stuff, skateboarding and punk rock and whatnot. But, I always had a circle of friends, but I wasn't like an outcast or anything like that. Kind of a fairly normal social upbringing, I suppose, middle class and all that. But with comics, I didn't have a lot of friends that were into comics. It was kind of just something that I did mostly on my own. I just love drawing and storytelling and was drawn to it and was sort of obsessed with the stuff and would read and reread these things and was making my own stories since I was, 4 years old or whatever. Had some friends that were into the X-Men toys and the cartoon and stuff when we were young. But like, I remember in high school, my friends basically didn't read comics. It was just something I did. It wasn't like I felt, I wasn't like a social outcast or, didn't have a lot of friends or anything, but it was kind of a hobby that I did on my own.
You weren't sitting there at lunch reading an issue of Ghost Rider, and then someone came up and grabbed your peanut butter and jelly sandwich and pulled it open and pushed it down on the pages. Nothing like that.
No, it wasn't that bad.
That never happened to me, by the way. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It was just I want to prove to you that I could come up with an example of something in my head.
Yeah. I had some friends that were into, I guess I had some friends that were into drawing and stuff, but they weren't as into comics as I was. But yeah, I mostly ran in like skateboarding. My friend circle was like skateboarders for a long time. So that was like our unifying factor. And comics was just like the thing that I did.
What era of punk are you listening to? Are we talking like you're going back to early 80s, Black Flag, Minor Threat, or is it I guess you're a teenager in the 90s, so we're talking like NoFX and all that kind of...
NoFX was really big. I loved Punk and Drublic. I listened to that thing. I probably know it by heart still. But I was into, early punk through my dad. My dad was into all kinds of music, classic rock, especially, and music up through contemporary rock at the time, like Nirvana and Pearl Jam. He was into that at the same time I was. So he raised me on like, The Clash and Sex Pistols and stuff like that. And then I went and got into like NoFX and went back and got into some of the earlier punk, like Black Flag and Operation Ivy and stuff like that. Bad Religion, Green Day. But then by the time the pop punk era really took off, I was like in, I don't know, late high school or early college, and I was like, no, this stuff sucks.
Yeah.
I had to be like a few years older or a few years younger, I think, to like really be into Blink-182. Or maybe I was just, I admit that all these things are really arbitrary distinctions of like liking Green Day, but not liking Blink-182 is like a, something that signals I was born in 1983 or something.
There is something there. I don't know what it is. Cause it was Sex Pistols. Well, I got into, how did I get into Black Flag? Oh, I know how, because of Rollins. Because Rollins band was huge in the early 90s. That got me into Black Flag. I was already into Fugazi. That got me into Minor Threat, and then everything Bad Brains and all the stuff that came out of that there. So there was that. And then Sex Pistols led to, I don't know, but Green Day was on the radio.
Yeah.
And I can say on the radio. Yeah.
Though they were huge in 1994. Oh, I remember I also was huge into Screeching Weasel. I loved.
I don't know if I've ever
Screeching
heard that, but I remember them.
Oh my god. I was at the mall doing like the mall rat thing as a skateboarder and just like hovering around, and these like older teenagers, which they were probably like 16 at the time or something. They were like punks, and they like razzed me and my friend for wearing like mainstream band t-shirts like Nirvana and shit. They're like, you guys need to listen to like real punk rock, man, not this corporate rock. And they bought me Boogada 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 on cassette, the Screeching Weasel album. And I fucking loved that thing. I probably listened to that almost more than any other album in my life.
They bought you? That's
yeah. They like each put in like $2 and bought me like a cassette tape for $8 or something like that. And it worked.
Funny.
It worked. They flipped me. They turned me into a Screeching Weasel maniac for a while.
It just sounds like it's something out of like an Amy Heckerling movie or something like that. Where like a bunch of punks in the mall. I don't know. It just seems so like a movie, like a thing that would happen in a movie. Yeah. As opposed to real life.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. They were just, I didn't know them. They were just, I think
that's what I'm saying. A bunch of strangers.
They saw like, you know, a young, I was probably like 12 or 13 at the time. Like a kid that they thought was cool and had potential. And they were like, we got to get this kid on the right track away from this corporate mainstream sellout rock.
Yeah. Okay. So you're skateboarding around Canton. Are you like really doing it? You go in and you like putting the wax on the edges of things?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I was. It was like my life for a couple years. Probably from like 13 to 16, which you know was probably only 3 years, but it felt like a long time back then. And hanging out with a lot of older kids that you know people who had cars and were going around to skate spots, and that's what we did. Like the Canton, now I go back a lot because I have family there still. And, you know, they've done what a lot of cities have done, which is try to revitalize their downtown and has actual, whatever, restaurants, breweries, public spaces. But back when I was a kid, it was a ghost town. The downtown was abandoned. You wouldn't see anyone down there except, homeless people and like some people who worked in law offices, like taking lunch. And it was like we had the whole city to ourselves. It was like a playground. Like the downtown was pretty much abandoned. Very much the time of like industrial Midwest, dead downtowns. And yeah, we just roamed, man. We roamed around the city, skated. It was great. It's a great moment in time.
Yeah. That's like every story about Ohio that I hear from guests, from like anyone who was born from or anyone who was around there in the 70s and 80s. It's just like, yeah, the downtown was just like this industrial hellscape.
It's kind of weird because, you know, there probably won't be anything like it again unless things get really bad. Or there's some,
but fingers crossed.
Yeah. But I think we're more into like, yeah, who knows? But people are more into sort of like, you know, dense living and want to live near things. And cities there was like this period in time, you know, where everybody, I guess, you know, white flight and other factors just caused everybody to move to the suburbs for more space, and just there was no public services, and jobs were leaving the country during that time, and especially manufacturing jobs in the Midwest. And you just had these cities that were like dead zones. I mean, the city itself, like Canton, when I grew up, the population at the time was much bigger than it is now. Mm-hmm. Arguably there was more going on then, but there wasn't anything going on downtown. It did feel weird. The only thing I have felt since then like it was during the pandemic when all the streets were empty and everything, and you could just go out and you could be in a place that was normally busy and there would just be no one around you, literally no one. And it could be only you in an area that would never again be like that. Hopefully.
Yeah, it was great.
Cause I was in Portland during the pandemic, and I was kind of, running around doing stuff during lockdown, like not partying and stuff, but like running to the warehouse to get books and, you know, running errands and stuff. And I kind of liked being out there and just like no one being around and just seeing how surreal it looked and just driving around just to do it, for something to do and just witnessing but anyway, that reminded me of growing up in Canton when it was kind of just us roaming around with skateboards and you'd maybe see a couple other people, but no one to bug you.
Uh-huh. What brought your parents to Canton in the first place? Did they grow up there?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know a ton of my family history beyond my parents, honestly. I mean, I know that my great grandparents on my dad's side were from Hungary, and I don't know why people settled in Canton, Ohio, but they did.
What did they do for a living, your parents?
My dad works in truck parts, like rebuilding transmissions and sales for them. He doesn't rebuild them anymore. He did that when I was a kid. And then my mom has worked various jobs over the years, mostly service industry stuff. Like when I was a kid, she was a server at a restaurant for a long time.
Were they keeping tabs on you when you were a kid, or were you just basically able to have free reign and go skate wherever you wanted to?
Yeah, they weren't neglectful parents, but I think that,
sure.
Everything was a little more lax back then. You could, I've been trying to kind of think about that more as I have kids now. They're 4 and 7. And I'm thinking about stuff like, well, how old was I when I would just like say I was going over to a friend's house and, disappear and come back when I come back. I wasn't 7, but young adult and teen years, man. Yeah. Like you didn't have cell phones. I didn't call my parents from a payphone and tell them what I was doing. I would just go with friends after school and we would go do whatever. And then you'd come home, be
back before dinner.
It was kind of a different world. I want to enable that with my kids as much as possible, sort of like, not be helicopter parenting, but I think the world is just sort of different too. Like, I don't know. Maybe it won't be, but, I don't know. Part of it was skateboarding too. Like, I don't know exactly what other kids were doing, but like when you're on a board and your whole thing is like roaming around to different skate spots, like that's what you do. You like roam the city. Like we weren't necessarily hanging out at people's houses, although obviously we did that, but like, we would really go from one end of town to the next, like spend hours. We would just go out and do it constantly. It was like my life. At one point I was like, I'm never quitting skating. I want to be a professional skateboarder. Like, anyone who quits skating is fake. I mean, I just like couldn't even conceive of not doing it.
Yeah.
And then
how'd you get into skating in the first place?
I don't know how I got into it really. It's a good question. I haven't really thought about how I got into it.
Did you see Jason Lee in Mallrats?
No, yeah. I'm not sure how exactly I got into it, other than it just happened and me and some friends were into it, and then it just sort of became our lives, and we're watching skate videos at everybody's house and going out and skateboarding all day, and that was it.
Because the divergence here between us is that my parents were like, you're going to break your neck or smash your head if you skateboard. And so they refused to allow me to do it. So I just never got it. I mean, I when I was having a quarter life crisis, I bought a skateboard. And then my friend who was going through a protracted breakup, we would just very sadly, he got a skateboard too. And then we lived in South Philly, went to a parking lot of a supermarket. After it closed, so 9 p.m. we're just sadly skating in a circle because we can't do any tricks or anything like that. So just learning how to do it. So that was my skateboarding story. It's more tied to depression and existential question marks than it is tied to anything in my youth. But your parents were just like, yeah, just go skate. Did you wear a helmet or what?
Fuck no, helmets.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm just asking.
I did.
My parents were, this is the thing. My parents were just like, you're going to hurt yourself. You can't do it. I mean, it wasn't don't do it. It's you can't. They didn't allow me.
No, nothing like that. I did smash my face and break my front tooth out when I was like 15 or something. That sucked. I had to get an emergency root canal.
Oh.
And that was the worst injury though. I never broke any actual bones. But falling on your face on concrete and smashing your face isn't fun.
No, and that's what I'm trying to say. Is that like you knew that was a possibility and yet you still did it, and I was just like, yeah, you know what, my parents are right. I'm not even gonna try to. I was a little good boy, and you were a rebel.
We used to, do gaps, throw ourselves downstairs like over and over. I can't even.
What?
The damage to my joints now would just be. I don't know. You can absorb that when you're young, but like, I don't know how professional skaters keep up with it. I think they probably have a lot of bad joint problems and whatnot. But yeah, used to just get injured constantly, really.
And you were okay with pain, and you were okay with.
I guess, yeah. You definitely had to be like to do big gaps and stuff. That's I think the biggest thing is like you have to get over the fear factor. Like doing ground tricks is one thing, but like throwing yourself full speed over a gap or down 12 stairs is something that you have to like commit to, or you're gonna eat it. So
what was your home life like?
Pretty good. Like I was saying, pretty kind of typical middle class American Midwest life, if there's such a thing.
But what did that mean for you specifically? Like, is it just that you only see your parents, for dinner or on the weekends?
Yeah, they had kind of like opposite work schedules, I think. So it was like, I guess I was like a what they used to call a latchkey kid, My dad would work regular 9 to 5 hours, and then my mom would work night shift at a restaurant. But my grandma would usually be there at home. She always hung out at the house, doing chores and crap, helping out. So there would usually be someone there. But come and go as I please, hang out with friends, play a lot of video games, skateboard.
So in other words, even though we're around the same age, my parents were they weren't helicopter parents, but they were much more like dictating things about my life. Whereas your parents kind of just like let you be, it seems.
I think so. Like they were pretty supportive of my art for sure. And yeah, didn't have a problem with skateboarding. I definitely watched whatever kind of movies I wanted. Like watched all sorts of, classic violent stuff with my dad when I was pretty young. Like younger than I would probably consider showing my kids movies like Predator and Alien. But, all that classic shit at the time was like stuff that my dad watched with me. And then we'd have my friends over and I'd have to like call their parents and ask them if they could watch a rated R movie. And so I guess I had fairly permissive parents.
Okay, so do you have any authority figures? I mean, I guess they're authority figures, but laying down the law type.
Yeah, I don't know. There wasn't any law to lay down. I wasn't like doing anything I shouldn't have been. I mean, I remember I got caught smoking when I was 13 and shit like that. But like, yeah, I wasn't doing anything crazy.
Did you have any direction in your life? You said you liked to draw, but like, was that an actual direction or was it just something you enjoyed doing?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to, I wanted to draw comics since I was like, whatever, 3 years old or something, as long as I can remember, basically. My dad can draw and he would draw with me when I was a kid but he didn't like draw much during my life. He was super talented and like painted, but he sort of gave it up and just became like a blue collar worker. But I just got real into it and, kept it going and basically didn't want to do anything with my life except draw comics of some sort. And then with the kinds of comics I wanted to draw, changed over time. Like I wanted to draw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then when I was a teenager, I got into like, I got into Watchmen and Dan Klaus and indie comics and then I got into political cartooning and that became my career for like 20 years. And then now I'm back to, I'm doing Toxic Avenger and, I want to do Ninja Turtles and X-Men basically. I'm going back to, that stuff.
Was being an artist, did that become your identity when you were a kid?
I don't know if it was my identity or not. I think skateboarding was definitely my identity for a while. I was always like the kid who could draw good. Like I could draw pretty well at a young age. So I was like, always drawing whatever, drawing shit to impress people. I would make like cartoons about teachers and, you know, that type of shit, and like rip on people, and just would have a notebook filled with crap like that. I don't know if it was my identity, but it was, you know, I kind of went in and out of phases of drawing, like how much I would draw, but I always came back to it, always was building on it. So yeah, I don't know if it really became my identity per se until I started doing it for a living full time, you know, which was also pretty young. Like at 18 and 19, I was doing comics full time, or at least drawing full time, because I did a lot of freelance illustration for the first, I don't know, 6 years of my career. And then it was my identity, I would say.
But when you were a kid, like, was there a thing you wanted to, like, you were like, I'm going to be an artist, and that was there kind of like pushing you from an early age? Or were you just kind of like, oh, I'm good at this, so I'll keep going, and like, I do want to make comics, so I'll just keep going? Like, I'm trying to like figure out, was there like something inside you that was pushing you in a direction, or was it just like, yeah, I'm good at this, so I'll keep doing it?
I don't know. I guess whenever I've had something to say or a desire to do something, tell a story, it's always been in comics form. So, you know, like I was saying, the types of comics have just changed. It's like, you know, after 9/11, I turned 18 like 2 days after 9/11. So it was like right on
Happy birthday.
And that was the week I started college. So it was just like right at the 9/11 era is like this sharp delineation of like adulthood and going into college, and also me getting fairly political. You know, I wasn't raised in a particularly political household or anything. And so then when I got, you know, mad about the Bush administration and the wars, and it just seemed natural to just do political cartoons about it. And then I, you know, ended up doing it for 18 years straight, like once I started. But I still had, you know, the desire to do longer comics and different kinds of comics. I mean, I think my problem is that I want to do too many kinds of comics. You know, I want to do a serious nonfiction graphic novel. I want to do my creator-owned comics. I want to write mainstream stuff. You know, I love it all, kind of.
Yeah, no, I get it. I have like a cork board of different scripts and books and things over there. And it's just like, I mean, I don't know if it's the same with you, but it's just like, all right, well, which one is paying me at this moment? And then that kind of like gets the energy. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, especially now with kids, and I'm 40, you know, like I can't really tinker around too much on side projects and stuff that isn't paid for. I have like a pretty strict 40-hour work week, and I like to get my sleep these days. I used to be able to work nonstop, and I used to do all-nighters and shit to meet deadlines, man, and I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. It was too hard.
So wait, if you weren't raised in a political household, are you learning politics from like punk music?
Yeah, you know, like looking back, I think, you know, listening to that kind of shit and Rage Against the Machine was like, you know, making me woke. 'Cause, you know, we didn't have we did have the internet back then, but it was a different thing.
It was Angel Fire and GeoCities.
Yeah. I don't even think Wikipedia existed, right? Like if you wanted to just learn the cursory history of some event, you didn't really have the opportunity to. So I don't know. I mean, I did read, you know, another sort of classic thing of its time is like reading The People's History of the United States when I was like 18 or something. And that really, formulated. But yeah, like reading like Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky when I was like 18 really helped. And yeah, I don't know what I would attribute it to, but like I said, my parents weren't that political. They were kind of, I mean, I think they were, I don't even know politics didn't come up a whole lot, you know, like, I mean, I think they were mostly voted Democrat, but like nowadays, of course, they're more political and like are Facebook addicted boomers who post, you know, cringy anti-Trump stuff all the time.
All right, at least it's anti-Trump stuff.
Yeah, for sure. No. They're liberal, and yeah, we don't have a problem like I'm lucky that I don't have any problems in my immediate family with like not being able to get along because of politics. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't really know. I don't think it came from anywhere growing up. I think it came from the changes in the country, like around 9/11, and but that also coincided, with adulthood. So it's hard for me to say, like, would I have been as political in a world where none of that happened and 9/11 didn't happen and Al Gore was president and things kind of the 90s Clinton era sort of continued on, but it didn't.
But like, I think to have that, to care in the first place, you have to have you have to be raised with some kind of ethical backbone. Am I wrong about that? I mean, you didn't it wasn't just like 9/11 happened and you suddenly gave a shit, right? No,
I mean, I think I was, influenced by a lot of, pop culture and music and stuff like that. I had a very, like when I was a preteen or young, when I was 12 and 13 and skateboarding and stuff, I just had this real like anti-establishment streak in me. And I don't know what I was so mad about, right? It was just like this classic, suburban white kid whose life is kind of fine, but is pissed off at every adult. And I hated religion. I hated stuff like that.
For what reason? Were you raised with religion and you were rebelling against it?
A little bit. I was raised in like a super soft Catholic household. We didn't go to church that much, but I was put in Sunday school, for like an hour a week or something. And
did you do CCD?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I always thought it was stupid. I don't even remember ever believing in religion. I was like, what grade must I have been in? I was like, must have been in 5th, 6th grade, but 6th grade was probably the last year I went. I was just like, what is this? Why am I doing it? I was even like, I was like confronting my parents about it because they weren't super religious. I was like, why are you sending me to this thing? Who cares? Does it? I was over it pretty early. I was kind of like the annoying atheist before the new atheist movement started.
Uh-huh.
I was like that when I was like 14. I was like to argue with everybody about how it made no logical sense to believe in any religion.
Yeah. Okay, so what are you fighting against? What are you pushing back against? Is it just that the suburbs don't feel good to you? What is it that is the thing that's like where you deviate from, a button-down lifestyle?
I don't know. That's for scholars to pick apart,
Well, what was the authority in your life and what that was pushing down to you? Because I think for me, there was definitely again, I go back to the beginning where I was talking about like these characters I identified with, where I knew I was different from the start, just from being Jewish in a Christian area. And I wasn't, it's not like people were calling me a kike every day. What happened, I think there were like 2 anti-Semitic things that happened to me my entire childhood. And they were like, one was not great, but it wasn't like, it wasn't defining. It was just like, here's a difference and you're different from all these other people. And there was just that kind of like molecular knowledge in my brain that started to like push me aside. And I think it's just like a snowball rolling down a hill. But with you, and then that made me, and then I think like learning about the Holocaust from an early age, I'm like, oh, there's injustice in the world. And I think all that stuff kind of like mixed together. But what is is there any authority in your life where you were like pushing back against, and that's this early kind of thing, or is it really just, it's kind of just like part of the costume of being into skating and punk?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think that there was any actual authority in my life that was oppressing me or that I was strongly rebelling against. But I did have that kind of chip on my shoulder about authority from a young age. I just, hated school. I hated definitely hated religion. I hated my town. I wanted to get out of there and go someplace different where things were happening and everybody wasn't so lame, unlike me. But, I sort of flipped on that stuff now. I mean, I think, like I said, a lot of that need to like differentiate yourself and have that punk rock attitude is, silly to carry on into your middle age life. I think is appealing as a young man, but you get over that stuff. And I think even the reasons I moved to Portland, Oregon, and to be a place that's cool and liberal and where there's a lot of artists and stuff, like that stuff's not even really active in my thinking these days. Like I moved to a small town, I don't live rurally, but outside the city, it's rural for hours of driving. And it's like, I live like a family. If I'm a family man now, I go pick up my kids from school and I'm like, oh yeah, I see the appeal of living in a small town and I don't care about like living any place cool anymore. So, I haven't really thought about this stuff like until you're asking it, like what made me this way or what influenced my thinking. I mean, I don't know. It's so long ago. I'm not sure.
Because I think it's interesting, you have this kind of, I don't want to be here in this small town. So there's something had to make, like, either you want to fit in a somewhat, you want to find your people, but you said you weren't even an outcast. Like, I wasn't an outcast, but I still wanted to find more of my people, which I didn't find, progressively. I until I moved to New York finally. And then I found like a bunch of people who were, somewhat similar to me. Enough that like it was a big scene, especially at UCB and stuff. But like there was always that thing pushing me.
I mean, I grew up in, in a town where it seems like after you're out of high school, things start solidifying real quick, and you just find yourself in some job, and a lot of people seemed on what I considered a pretty boring path. And I didn't know how I was going to be an artist there. Like the internet as it exists now and what it really helped my career and defined my career, didn't exist then. So it was like, inconceivable. It's like just, I think you could be raised anywhere now and have a little bit more of, you have access to the world in a way that you didn't back then, and you can make a career as a freelancer, by being online. But then it was like, it felt like I had to get out of there and go somewhere where there was actually people that were doing the same thing as me. I mean, back then, like when I did move to Portland, Oregon, and it's a comic city.
Yeah.
Meeting all those people, becoming friends with a ton of people that were working in the same field as me, I mean, was really important, both like professionally and socially. And, I do have friends, lifelong friends in Canton, Ohio. So I'm not dissing everybody, but it is like, there are some people who, it's just like, man, they didn't really do anything. And they're, and it is kind of, like I said, they have revitalized some of the city. So there's some stuff to do, but like, the population is just way down, even from when I was growing up. So it does feel a little depressing to be there. And there's just like massive parking lots that are empty that were built for life in the 1970s, and, buildings that are abandoned because there's just not enough things to put in them and not enough people to go to them. So it is kind of a partially abandoned place still, even though there's pockets where like the downtown where they've like invested in the downtown core, but it's still just like a lot of these cities that were built in like the 40s and 50s, and it's like, I think in the 50s was the peak of the population of Canton, Ohio, and it was like double what I grew up with, and now it's half that. Like when I just went back, my dad gave me a piece of my elementary school, which he went over. It was just 3 blocks away. They bulldozed it to the ground because there aren't enough people to warrant the amount of schools they have. So they're tearing them down. They consolidate. We used to have 2 high schools. They're consolidating it to 1. So it's that type of thing. It's kind of sad. It's just sort of like, hearing about your childhood elementary school being bulldozed, and then you go visit home and it's like, oh, what happened to that place? And it's like, oh, it's been empty for 10 years. Like, no one's bought the movie theater. They just have left it there. You know, it is kind of like that.
So yeah, so you saw kind of that, even though they weren't bulldozing your elementary school when you were a kid, you saw that around.
Yeah, it had that. Well, and in some ways seemed worse at the time because, like I was saying, like the downtown was just empty, right? It didn't have a feel of like a town with stuff going on. Whereas now as an adult, there's more to do. You can go out to some bars, you can go out to eat, but yeah, it had the feeling of like, this is it was a playground for us, right? It wasn't being used by adults. It was like a the city itself was like neglected infrastructure.
And you had a thing you were good at. So there's, I think that's the key almost, right? Between you and maybe like friends who maybe stayed there and were like happy with, you know, hey, this is a nice life. You know, I know it's an industrial wasteland. You know, that's why I'm saying I'm not knocking any of this stuff. I'm not knocking any of the people that stayed in Reading, right? But I'm just saying there are some people for whom this was fine. But you had a thing you were good at, and I think that was this maybe motivating push in your brain, in your existential center or whatever.
Yeah, like just, you know, doing comics was really kind of like a singular obsession my whole life. Like it's the only thing that I've really been working towards and maintaining. I mean, I've pretty much been drawing comics continuously since I was, you know, 3 or 4 and doing it professionally since I was like 18 or 19. And more or less full time. I mean, I've gone through periods of time when I'm like running the nib and I'm really just editing and really in reality having an email job where I'm coordinating a ton of stuff and emailing with printers and with creators and stuff and like a high volume of email because we're publishing every day. But like, so all I'm doing there is having an email job, but it's an email job that's around a comics publication I created. So that was, you know, fun. It wasn't drawing comics necessarily, but, you know, I've been involved in comics and been basically doing the kind of work I wanted to do for the majority of my adult life, which is, you know, I wouldn't say I've made a fortune doing it, but I mean, I can't complain about being able to do what I want for a living.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's all that matters. That's if you can survive on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, I didn't care about surviving too much when I was like in my 20s and I worked around the clock and didn't have kids and made obscenely low amounts of money for the amount of hours I worked, I would say. I got to make a certain amount of money now because I have kids, but I mean, you know, so far so good. I'm doing it. Knock on wood. I think comics is highly unstable, worrying. Doesn't come with a pension.
Matt, certainly. What, this is the thing. I think post 2008, what job doesn't that describe?
Yeah. I mean, you know, that's true. Although and even people who, you know, have good jobs and make good money, those jobs also feel fairly precarious. You know, people don't get in a lot of jobs anymore that they stay in, for their whole life. But I know people who work a lot of, you know, public employees, they get pensions, stuff like that. You know, if you don't know what you're going to do in life, or you didn't have, you know, any super strong ambitions to do something in the creative industry or something, it's just like you couldn't do better than like working at the post office.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know some people, and one of my friend's dads was a driver's ed teacher, did it from like when he was super young. These people are retiring at 55 with pensions and shit. I
have a friend from high school who got a job immediately at the post office out of school, and I think is retired now.
Yeah, it's mid-40s. Now that I'm 40, I'm like, I can't, you know, I cannot imagine retiring. As long as I'm able, I think I will want to do comics, but financially being able to retire would be a dream. And it's unfathomable to me, but also like now that I'm 40, I'm like within range of like finally thinking about this stuff and, you know, freaking out a little bit, but like knowing people that are just like done when they're like young, relatively young. You're like, whoa, dude, you got like 30 years to just, I don't know.
Yeah. And that's why everyone should become cops, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're towards the end of the show. And I guess I'm just trying to like, was there anything else when you were a kid where you're like, I want to do that? Or was it always the singular focus that kind of just pushed you along your entire life?
Yeah, it was comics. I mean, I mentioned I had brief delusions of like skateboarding forever.
For sure.
And
then you got rejected from the X Games, and that was the end of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, no, it's just been comics. I mean, I pretty much have been obsessed with it. And
because I'm asking because you come from, it seems like you say like a middle class or working class background. My parents didn't want what I was doing for me. They wanted me to be better than them. And they wanted doctor, lawyer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I say it all the time.
Well, my parents were pretty supportive. They pushed me to go to the Art Institute because they were like, you gotta have something that's adjacent to what you want to do, because, they were supportive, but they were like realistic. So I went to, what I did is I got an associate's degree in graphic design in 2 years and I did do some graphic design early on, mostly illustration though, was how I paid the bills, like freelance illustration. So it wasn't like full-time comics, but, they pushed me to that, which was a pretty sensible thing. But then I also didn't want to get my bachelor's because I didn't want to waste more time in school, more money on student loans. I wanted to get working as soon as possible. And like I was always the youngest kid in my grade because when my birthday fell. So I was like, I turned 18 the week I went to college, and I was out of college at 21. And then, and I was already doing work. I was already like being published as a political cartoonist. And so, I was in a real hurry, frankly, to like get working and get done with that part of my life. Like I didn't want to waste time in high school or college. I was like, I want to be like a working cartoonist. I remember that being like a big mission of mine.
When you say you were like drawing political cartoons, then like, are you talking about like a plane flying into the two towers, and the two towers are like labeled like love and honor, and then the Bush's domestic agenda is labeled the plane? Like, is that like that kind of stuff, or like what is?
No. That was right before my time. So I started drawing in 2003, in the lead up to the Iraq War, getting published initially in like the student newspaper at Art Institute, which was like a Xeroxed affair. And
like a zine?
I was essentially a zine, like I'm sure the print run must have been absurdly low. Like hand stapled probably. Wasn't going off a printing press. But I was really, I got really into the school of like alt weekly political cartoons, like Ruben Balling and Tom Tomorrow and people like that. I mean, who I, eventually became colleagues with and friends with. Like I know those guys quite well, but at the time I was just a little kid and they were like the generation older than me. And so that was those guys had stuff to say and they were doing cool things with the forum. And I, everybody kind of makes fun of those old style editorial cartoons that you described now. It's kind of become a thing. But I had a rage. I hated those things, at a pretty young age. And it was sort of like, part of my mission statement. It was like, I'm doing something different. Like, I really liked this school of alternative weekly comics and like this mainstream stuff where they label stuff and have these treacly emotions with like crying Statues of Liberty was just the lamest shit. Yeah. Now the Onion cartoon has been going for, I don't know when, 15 years or so. It's been a while, that guy's been making fun of that stuff.
So, okay. One last question, because this is the thing that's still kind of like in the back of my head, and I'm wondering if it resonates with you. You said your dad had wanted to make cartoons or comics. He was an artist and kind of gave it up.
Not comics, but Yeah, or I mean, he did a lot of painting. He did paintings that hung in the house that are quite good. That he did when he was like 17 and 18, and he didn't do much after that.
Do you know what made him give it up? Like, did he think it was just not practical? Did he think that it was going to be too hard to try to make it to do it professionally? Did he just enjoy it as a hobby? Did he want to start a family? Like, what had stopped him?
You know, I don't know exactly, but I mean, I think that just becoming an adult and needing to get a job, you know, probably. He got into rebuilding transmissions when he was young, and then worked his way up to sales and has done that his whole life. So, you know, I knew that he went through this interesting period where he got back into painting. Like, at this point, it was probably 20 years ago, maybe. And he did some great paintings, and, you know, he still had it, and it was kind of impressive. And then he didn't keep with it. I don't know the psychology there. He's clearly not, you know, I have that level of motivation. And I do think that, you know, part of it was like, my dad didn't do this. Like, he could have done something with it. And I don't want to be caught in that, you know? I mean, not that there's any, and there's no, and I don't like the sound of that either. 'Cause I'm not like, it's fine to just get a job and live a life. And, you know, he did that, and he provided a good living for us and everything. Everybody doesn't have to be an artist or something to have more value than other people. But I really wanted to, and I didn't want to just, you know, get a normal job and
I'm not knocking it. I've said before, like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I am saying that I wonder how much of that, and you kind of said it, like, it got in you a little bit. And I'm wondering if that was like this kernel where you're just like, oh, I just don't want to do that. And he gave up what he wanted to do in order to just like get a regular job. So, and again, it doesn't have to be conscious. I just wonder if like it was just the atmosphere.
I think so, for sure, especially when I was younger, because it was, you know, that stuff was more, I don't know, it was more recent then. It's kind of weird to, you know, look back and think about your parents and be like, oh, they were younger than I am now, when, you know, when I was a kid. And, you know, his paintings were hanging in the house and stuff like that. I mean, I still have one. Although I don't have any place to put it in my new house because it's kind of big, and my wife ain't let me throw it up in the living room. So.
What about that wall right behind you?
You know, I could. I haven't really
that bookshelf
put up a lot in this house since we moved in. Yeah, it's mostly bookshelves in my office, but I do have wall space.
But yeah, because I had the same kind of like, I knew my parents did not want to be stuck in Reading. You know, they're from New York, but they ended up there to like take care of some family, and I know they didn't want that, and I think that got in me. And motivated me in a way that, like, you know, friends of mine who maybe were funnier than me, like they didn't have the desire to professionalize it, or the motivation to professionalize it, or ambition.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Canton, Ohio is a football town. It's you know, allegedly the home of football. The Football Hall of Fame is there.
Fun.
You can find people who get into weird disputes about where football's from, but it doesn't matter. It's a football town. When I was there, they were psychotically into football. My high school was like the number one national team for 2 years straight. It was like crazed. And they had this famous rivalry with Massillon, a small town nearby, that it's so intense that there's like 2 different documentaries about this rivalry. And I remember, you know, it's kind of a town where like when I was a kid, you know, like the 50-year-old guys were still talking about the games like that they played, you know. It was like a town where a lot of the people's like best days were like when they were in high school and like football was reigned supreme. And actually, now that I'm saying that, it's like, I hated that, right? I was, cause I also was like, you know, this skateboarding. I mean, skateboarding's a sport, but it was a delegitimized sport at the time.
Right.
And, you know, I was just like, now I'm a lot more chill about these things, and especially people liking sports. But when I was young, I was just like, all they care about is sports and being zombies. But the substantive part of that is that, yeah, it didn't. It appeared that a lot of people's best days were when they were in high school, and I was like, that doesn't sound like the life I want to live.
Yeah, it's giving Al Bundy, like,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I see how now. Okay. Now I think I see how all of this stuff kind of like swirled together to get you out of there, as opposed to like, I don't know, you could have gotten a job and again, like I'm saying, I'm not knocking this, but you could have gotten a job somewhere and then, maybe drawn on the side on weekends, maybe,
sure.
or like you drew the logo for the store you work at or whatever, right? There's stuff there.
Yeah. Oh man, I got, one of my good friends from high school, he had a kid super young, like right out of high school. And at the time it seemed crazy. We were like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. And then now his kid is growing up out of the house. He owns a restaurant. And, I'm like, oh man, I still got I got like 15 years before my kids are out of the house. I can't imagine being 40 and being free and clear of that. So there's upsides and downsides to every way of life. Yeah. He sacrificed on the front end and a lot of stuff he couldn't do because he had a baby when he was in his early 20s. But now he can go do whatever he wants, and I'm the one that has to live a rigid, structured life and ask my wife if she can cover for me if I want to go out of town and do this and that. Yeah. I'm going to San Diego next week for Comic-Con, and it's like, it's a big deal to leave for 5 days, I gotta get some, burn some relationship capital,
A rigid, structured life where you get to draw the Toxic Avenger.
Yeah, but, structurally, like my day-to-day life is pretty rigid. Like I gotta be up, take my kids to school, pick them up at a certain time. Then it's dinner and bedtimes, and, I got a free time to myself at like after 9, but, but like, I gotta do housework. I gotta catch up on my work. I gotta do other things. I can't, I do live a pretty structured, normal, boring family life stuff. I mean, I'm super happy with it, and content with both my family life and my career. But I don't have like, I'm not doing whatever I want. I've just, got to work. I got to get all my shit done by 5 p.m. And, if I don't, then it's on me. I got to pick it up the next day.
Matt, thank you for joining me.
Yeah. Thanks for talking to me.
How do you feel? Did you get to the stuff that you kind of preloaded in your brain?
Yeah, well, no, because I thought we were going to talk more maybe about just, I don't know, the earliest drawings or stuff I did. I was thinking of this comic book I made called The Phoenix Force. That was
based on Jean Grey?
No, but it was just an amalgamation of X-Men, Wildcats, and Cyberforce.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, because those Cyberforce and Wildcats it was the X-Men, but this. Yeah. The X-Men, but they're aliens, and the X-Men, but they're cyber.
Made of metal.
Yeah. So it was like, there was kind of like the Wolverine type person, the big, strong person, the hot chick, the leader. Yeah. Phoenix Force, man. Great comic. I don't think I finished it, but I used to do all kinds of shit like that. I loved it. I made up all these characters when I was young. I had a whole suite of them.
Okay. Here's the real last question then. Do you remember the first like real original character you came up with?
Yes. Chubby.
Go on.
No, Chubby.
Oh, Chubby.
Chubby was a kind of like a skateboarding version of Calvin. And this is before I become a skateboarder. This is like second grade. So I just make this character Chubby, where I think I'm just clearly ripping off Calvin, and it's what I'm doing. But then, funny thing is like, so my dad, I think like a lot of dads, but maybe to a significant degree, my dad would make up words and like family in jokes and stuff. And Chubby became kind of a term in our household for like both a little kid and also like acting crabby like a little kid. So like man, like, don't be chubby. Like, you're acting chubby. So it's something we still say.
It sounds very, I mean, I know you're not far from Pittsburgh, but it sounds like Pittsburghese a little bit. Like the way people talk in Pittsburgh, where like, I think nebby is a word.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff like that where there's even words that I didn't realize weren't words, for a while. Like narf. So narf, like, don't, like, if I let you borrow my book and I say, like, don't narf it up, you know, just give it back to me in good condition. That's not an actual word, but I think it makes sense and you understand what I'm saying. Cause it's like gnarly or rough it up. You're narfing it.
You get it from context.
Yeah. So there's a lot of words like that in my family. And like my wife noticed it when she would be around me and my dad and my brother. And she'd be like, you guys just sort of like say shit. And I'm like, so yeah, man.
Your dad would just make up words, but it was like, I mean, words that are understandable from context. He's not like making up like an alien language.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And it's also not like, a lot of like catchphrases and things from movies that like when someone says, you say right back, that we still do in my family. I was thinking at some point of like writing up a list, like doing a post or something, like a blog post of like trying to think through all these phrases and terms that have come up in my family that we've made up over the years.
Yeah. Or that's like a thing from Predator that you've then adapted into your...
Predator certainly is huge.
Hugely quotable movie.
Yes. I mean, I think a lot of people, that's not an unusual thing. Yes. There is a lot of Predator, a lot of those types of movies, lines from those movies. Tombstone was big with my dad. Remember that?
That makes sense.
You know,
that's a
that's
dad movie.
Oh yeah, that's one for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other examples, but there's just a ton of. Here's one for you. So me and my brother would be playing like Street Fighter on Super Nintendo, and you know Ryu says Hadouken.
Yeah,
and my dad would hear it as a toolkit, a toolkit,
toolkit.
But then it became a thing, like, if anyone would be like, hey, do you have a wrench? Like, we'd be like, a toolkit. So that's still a thing, you know, like if you're trying to fix something at home and you'd be like, hey, do you have a toolkit? You know, it's like, when we get together, it's just like that nonstop with like different references and stuff. And to an outsider, definitely would appear strange.
This is familiar, not necessarily with my dad, but my one of my best friends. Like I remember we were hanging out. This is like pre-pandemic, but like we were at my parents' house. My wife and I mean, she was my fiance then, but like we were visiting, and then my friend from high school came over and hung out, and she eventually went to bed because she could not stand the fact that it was just like literally like inside joke after inside joke.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm going to let you guys just do this. Or just like asking Alexa to play different things. Because my parents had an Alexa that was inside. They were inside jokes. Play the whatever it was. So I imagine your family life is just all inside jokes like that.
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah.
Okay. Now I feel like I figured it out. Thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah, man. All right.
And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.